Hey everyone, this is Kayla Lewis, MSW grad student, going to be graduating in 2 days. And accompanying me, I have
Trinity Newell, full-time communication student, part-time troublemaker. How y'all doing today?
We're doing good. And you know, one thing about Trinity is she was a part of the social work program.
I was. I had a nice little stint there.
You know, we miss you.
I miss y'all sometimes too. Real talk.
Yeah. But you know what? Something that we're going to get into discussion for today is, and I'll just say it outright, election blues, how political engagement impacts mental well-being.
Okay. You sounded like me. That's an election blue. That sounds like a headline.
But, you know, more than anything, I think this topic was super cool to me because we're in a time where politics are changing. There's a lot of advocacy that's needed. You know, things are just ultimately going downhill.
No, seriously. I feel like I'm living in the episode of The Handmaid's Tale.
Truly. And it's sad to see the similar, honestly.
Yeah, it's giving Gilead.
Yes. But you know what? Through 2016 to 2024, the U.S. election-related stress was very high, Trent.
I believe it.
Very high. And 70% of Americans felt stressed during elections.
I believe I was stressed. I was stressed during every single election ever since 2016 because that's when Trump first.
Yes,
That was I remember being in middle school, being like, "Oh my gosh!" It was like a flip switch. Like everybody got ignorant overnight. It's like the freaks come mad at night. The freaks come mad at night. That's what it gave.
Yeah, you know, it definitely did, but it was outright in our face.
Right.
And, you know, when I began to do my research, because we're going to get into the study, however, but when I began to do this research, you know, Pew Research Center, they talked about how 59% of Americans reported political discussion to derive feelings of exhaustion. What do you think about that? Because when I think about politics, I think about how sometimes we don't always understand what goes into a certain policy or where that's rooting from.
Right.
And I think that can cause those stressful feelings in itself.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a lot of people don't even think. I feel like a lot of the stress comes from people not even knowing where to look to for answers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or not even knowing what to think initially.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like a lot of my stress came from even just scrolling on Facebook, seeing people being ignorant. It ain't even got to be the government.
Yeah.
It's
and
just
social media has a big factor, more than we think, because honestly, social media can be so, honestly, it can lead you to think something that really isn't it. And I think one big factorization that we are seeing commonly today is the funding for U.S. education and just, honestly, you know, even diversity and inclusion.
I talked about this today in my media law and ethics class. So, yeah, definitely, because the DEI stuff and everything with them trying to cut funding, they even cut Pell Grants.
Yes,
like here at St. Francis, I will give them credit for that. They did cover, you know, whatever they cut, but it's getting serious out here. And these are the same people who, you know, voted for him, who got student loans, can't buy a house, and we finna go into recession.
Indeed. And when we begin to think about, you know, the area that we live in, we live near a lot of minorities. And honestly,
we are minorities.
Yeah, say it.
We are minorities.
We very much are. And although we're educated and we understand these things, we've had great professors kind of really break this down. It's important that we sit on podcasts like this to just even discuss. And, you know, when we reference Fullwood, he acknowledges minority Americans to view political engagement as not essential to their lives.
And that's insane to me because let me tell you one thing. When have you ever seen politics before us, right? Because we never had a chance to partake in it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So when we're given the opportunity to make these changes, to do our due diligence that our ancestors fought so hard for us to do, and I see y'all just being all ignorant, like, oh, I want my stimmy, so I'm gonna vote for Trump. Right. It's disheartening, because it's just like
it really
it's not even funny. Like I can't even I'm laughing, but it's not even funny. You know what I mean? Because it's just like you're that disengaged with what's going on politically. You just don't care that bad as a minority. Because even if you look at these, I'm not sure the exact stats on it, but if you look at the people who even voted for Trump, it was Latinas, you know, black men.
Yes, it was.
You know what I mean? So it's and these are farmers, and these are the same groups, minority groups, and that forgot that they're minorities, I guess. Real quick, fast, and in a hurry. Now they in the same boat as us, and we try to tell you.
And, you know, after this election, just kind of seeing all the disarray, how Kamala was just telling us exactly, well, this is going to happen. And then for it to start happening in our face, and before it started to touch the higher ups, and, I just really felt like they thought it was just going to be the minorities.
Yeah.
They thought it was going to be the low class system that just was going to be cut out, that it wasn't going to touch the middle class, that it wasn't just going to touch the upper class. But, it's relevant to everybody, which led me to my study. I really wanted to explore and navigate the relationship between mental health, political engagement, and election distress.
I think that's a great study to tackle, especially with the political climate and the social climate, socioeconomic climate that we have in this nation right now. I always remember something my grandma told me: it's never going to be like a race war. It's never going to be black against white. It's going to be haves and have-nots.
Exactly.
And that's what this is.
And, as a social worker, we're here to provide that empathy, advocacy, emotional encouragement, promote civic engagement, well-being, all these different realms. So it's so important that we get involved.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, and getting involved involves, getting on a podcast, talking about it, get on the radio like myself, talking about it,
talking to your friends about it.
Literally encouraging your friends to go register to vote.
Yes.
Encouraging people who are making jokes about your literal, political stance, not even your political stance, but just, just making jokes about, oh, I'm not going to go vote. I'm not going to go. It's not funny. You just got to check it at the door. You just got to check that stuff at the door, really.
Absolutely.
It's not enough to just be complacent. You got to, at this point, you got to take some sort of initiative.
And we should. And I think that it's not solely just the social work perspective, but also the society and how we play our role as a whole.
Yeah.
And honestly, with this study, my contribution to society was, addressing the intersection of mental health and political engagement.
Right.
Aiming at, deriving this inclusive political climate, as well as enhancing healthy psychological political engagement.
Right.
Through all these different factors, it just makes it makes political engagement civic. It makes it engaging.
Right.
It makes it,
Although, it's exciting.
Yeah, it really does, quite honestly. But on the social work aspect, the study really aimed to mitigate those gaps in understanding how political engagement influences others' mental health and their well-being in general. Can we address those barriers to accessible political engagement? Because at the end of the day, we know that, within these marginalized populations, they don't always have these resources to be able to access. They don't have the knowledge or the competence to be able to read or honestly sit there and want to read to be able to vote.
Yeah, or even want to pay attention to anything that they see on TV. Like, it makes it so easy we have publicized, televised, broadcasted live debates. And people would rather go on the shade room and read the comments about the debate that got all types of, misconstrued facts or misherding stuff than actually sit there and watch the dang debate. You know what I mean? It's just, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense. And quite frankly, I'm so glad that you said that. Can you repeat what you just said?
Which one?
You just said something about about the engagement with the social media.
Oh yeah,
and about
definitely.
yes, because I feel like that's another big reason why people have stress or people are even desensitized. Like, or people are just like, I'm over it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even want to see it. I don't want to hear about it, because honestly, every time you put on the news, it's gonna be some bad. And we live in Illinois, and our politics aren't even good politics. We're corrupt. So even if you're from Illinois, you kind of having a look at the government anyway.
And it doesn't matter if you're a child at this point or if you're an older adult that's on hospice care.
Literally.
Because everyone is getting affected.
Literally.
And social media does play a huge role because, in a sense, it's going to gauge the person that's watching it. Whether it's true or it's false, they're going to take that narrative and they're going to run with it. And it becomes toxic, in a sense.
Yeah. Because I can say, just like I said, I had election stress in 7th grade, 2016, when Donald Trump got elected, right? And we don't have no real political affiliation. We don't know about economics for real. It's not like we care about the price of gas at the age of 13. These are things that they're hearing from their parents, that they're seeing on the news because their mom watches CNN. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because I'm a communications major, so I'm also big on left, right sides news. It 100% matters where you get your news from. Your
Absolutely,
media outlets, it 100% matters. So if your parents are watching Fox News and you come to school immediately after watching Fox News, you're going to feel a little bit hot when you see.
Yes, you are.
You know what I mean? You're going to feel hot. As opposed to some people who are, not watching Fox News. They're going to be like, okay, well, what's the big deal? But if you're watching the news before you go to school in the morning, like how I was, you're going to want to
Mhm.
protest the pledge allegiance when you go to school. Now people looking at you stupid. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think honestly, as social work students, and I know that you're not in our field
It's
anymore,
through and through for
but
me.
yes, it is, because you learn something, you take it away, and you teach the next person. And I think that's something so powerful about this institution, because in that way, now I'm strong enough to sit here in the podcast room with my friends and be able to distribute this whole segment.
Right.
And honestly be proud of the research study that I was able to provide, because it very much was a feasible study. It was very practical. I was able to access that accessible data from 2016 and just kind of looking through to see the stress levels from Pub Research and APA, American Psychological Association, as well as the participant. They were accessible, and this was a really cool study. But all the while, when I really sat back and I thought to myself, I'm like, without social workers, what would happen? And what do you think would happen?
I'm so glad you asked me this, because I feel like a lot of people don't even realize what social workers do.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like people, they hear social worker and they think about like DCFS, people taking away their kids,
And that's
crazy
not the
stuff.
case.
And that's not the case. Like, that's simply not the case. You know what I mean? Like, you just had a hospice internship.
Yes, I
You
did.
know what I mean? So it's just like, that's just simply not the case. So with that being said, social workers can do so many things, from be psychologists, work in hospice care, work in hospitals. They can be in child welfare. You know what I mean? But without social workers, I feel like this world would not know anything about policy, to be real, because I feel like social workers are the liaison
Mm-hmm.
for not, I don't want to say dumbing down, policy, but they're the communicators of the policy.
We're the
You
middleman.
don't exactly. You're literally the middleman. All these people that you see who go to lawyers, they have bachelor's degrees in social work, masters in social work. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, all these people know how to interpret policy. So without social workers, we as a whole, as a nation, as a society, I feel like we wouldn't know diddly squat.
And I think you're, to an extent, right. I don't want to give us all the credit, because we do a lot, and I think sometimes it does go unnoticed, which is very sad in itself. And we do hold these stigmas of taking people's children away. But what about those moments where, hey, we're outside and we're there for hours advocating on something that has absolutely nothing to do with us, but everything to do with the clients that we work with?
Exactly.
And there's just so many plethora of areas that social workers can touch on. But, without the intervention towards this study in particular, I feel that, these marginalized communities, they won't be advocated for, and they will continue that avoidance in political engagement.
Oh, yeah.
And more than anything, individuals will lack those effective coping strategies when experiencing heightened political stress.
Yeah. I feel like we're going out the world backwards. You know what I mean?
We really are.
We had a chance for progressive forward movement, and instead we regressed all the way back to 1963. So, you know what I mean?
Which is very scary.
Extremely scary. But I also, you know what I mean? And it's also very alarming that the minority groups who did show up to vote,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? They voted how they did,
Yes, they did.
And that just goes to show the access, where you said, like, the inaccess to proper just information.
Education.
These are the people
quite
who just
honestly.
don't, like, these are the same people who be like, oh yeah, I'm not talking to this social worker, I don't mess with social workers because they DCFS, they just take people kids. But the reason why, but you're the same person who voted for Donald Trump, who finna
Yeah.
do you and your child in.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, you're doing all this, you don't understand the policy. You don't even understand to vote. You don't want to know.
Absolutely.
And it's just like the
I would
fact
agree.
that you just like, you don't want to know. And it's not coming from a place of, I feel like it's coming from a place of ignorance, but it's also because ignorance is bliss.
Yes,
They would rather it be bliss. They would rather it be like that. But it's to the point where y'all decided where, oh, we don't want Kamala up there for whatever personal reasons you might have decided. But you decided, instead of being like, I'm going to stay out of it, you said, yeah, let me go vote for that. Because instead of being like, let me get a general understanding, a good understanding,
Absolutely.
a conscious understanding. And I feel like that's what a lot of people do these days, in this day and age. They just be like, okay, well, everybody sucks, I'm going to just pick my poison. No, do your research. No, like,
And you should do your research on everything. Because at the end of the day, and I think you, in a nutshell, said this, through activism and advocacy, they both work to reduce election-related anxiety. And honestly, like you just mentioned, there will be disengagement amongst the community if this doesn't come to a point where, we have to actively do something about it.
Yeah.
Because it is going downhill and it's only getting worse. And, you know, now we're in another term with Donald Trump.
And he talking about having a third term. And the way this oligarchy situation is looking, which, mind you, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris warned us about. Joe Biden literally addressed it in his departing speech. Literally said there's going to be an oligarchy. We're watching it form in front of our eyes. There's a couple, and if you don't know what oligarchy is a form of government where there's just a couple of large people at the top with a lot of money who are making the power moves. And that's what Elon Musk.
We're openly seeing
We're openly seeing it. And instead of the nation or people talking about it openly, we're having censored media. We're having,
and that's the scariest part.
We don't even know what's going on. We don't even know what's going on in the real world. Like, you have to go on TikTok and look up World Talk to see the news. I turn on Good Morning America and I'm looking at fluff pieces about soil and about things when I know 3 years ago I was watching actual hard news stories about politics and about Gaza and about what's actually going on in the world. We don't even get that type of information anymore. We don't even get that type of news. And people don't even realize that. And
they don't realize because, honestly, they don't watch the news. It goes all the way back to that main factor of I'm just either I am involved, I'm not involved in politics, or in a sense, I'm a bystander because I think that it's okay not to vote because my voice doesn't matter. And that's never the case.
And that's so sad that people think like that because every voice counts. Every voice
matters.
Yes,
it does.
And for people to feel like their vote doesn't matter or feel like their opinion doesn't matter, it's just like, I don't understand that. Like, I could never, and let me not say I don't understand that. I have been at that place. But at the point, there's a certain point where you be like, you can't care. And I feel like I feel like people use that as an excuse. When people say that, they use it as an excuse. Because when I felt like that, I genuinely was like, oh, no one's going to care, no one's going to care. But eventually that turned into, okay, well, if nobody cares, I might as well say it anyway. And here I am writing a column.
Look at that.
So
all the way full circle. And it just makes me think about, you know, in those moments of them feeling that they don't care. Is it that they don't care, or is it that, you know, I don't understand, so I don't want to be frustrated and feel like I'm less than because I'm in this establishment and I'm trying to vote and I'm trying to do these things, but I still don't feel listened to. I don't feel that they're going to take me seriously because I'm African American or because I'm Mexican or because I'm Asian or Native American. All these different ethnicities.
Because I have an accent or, you know, anything, you know, because there's more than one cultural barrier. It doesn't just stop at the skin. It doesn't just stop at the appearance. You know what I mean? Like Dr. O, perfect example. I've seen so many people play this man. So many people play this man because he has an accent. You know what this man is telling to you.
Yes,
and he's spitting facts, so let's not
every time
play like that.
Because one thing about it, although there is an accent, I've never felt that there was a language barrier with him.
Ever.
He's always very clear cut. His expectations are set, and more than anything, if you just listen,
literally,
it's
right
open
there.
Your ears. Yes, it's right there.
I feel like a lot of people don't want to open their ears, and I'm not sure if it's coming from a place of just ignorance is bliss, and they just want to be ignorant. Or if it's coming from a place of, I genuinely just don't want to be frustrated. Like you said, like, I just don't feel like being frustrated about not knowing what I have, like what I'm reading. You know what I mean? Because that's a lot. It's a lot. Because even when I went to vote for the first time in this past election, because this is my first time being able to vote in a presidential election. Let's not talk about it, but yeah. But anyway, I went to the poll and I didn't know a lot of the names on the ballot
because you don't see it.
Because you don't see them.
That's
exactly.
The thing. Yeah.
You don't see them, and again, it's all money moves. Again, I'm a communication major. It all comes down to advertising. It all comes down to all these things, and it's just like when it comes to politics, especially and it comes to like just spreading your word and advocating, it's very easy to advocate the wrong word when it comes to, because it's just like politics and money and state and union, like it's just, there's bound to be just, it's just not, So I don't know. Overall, it's just, I feel like when it comes to advertising, not knowing what your rights are, you have people like Donald Trump who have millions of dollars who can buy 30-second ads on Fox News during prime time. So that's exactly why people have that opinion. You know what I mean? Like, because that's what they're seeing. Whereas Kamala Harris, her money's long, but it's not Donald Trump long, right? So it's like, she can have her ads, but she's not going to get nowhere near the reach that Donald Trump is going to get.
Absolutely.
Simply because money talks. You know what I mean?
You know, money does talk. But when we begin to evaluate why, individuals may not participate in politics, as I was doing my research and just going through the studies, I noticed that there was high levels of election-related stress that correlated with lower psychological well-being. So we understand that, if I'm mentally not there, I'm not going to go out, I'm not going to vote, I'm not trying to entertain this on my phone, I'm not trying to look at it, all these different factors. But those same individuals, 12.5% of those voters exhibited PTSD symptoms from the election. And it's just like 2020 election, to be exact. So it's just, what do we do? What do we do when political engagement during the Trump administration negatively impacts mental health? Because now we're in a new term. So just think about all the individuals that were affected then, but now it's 10 times worse, if not 100 times worse, because not only are they experiencing symptoms of heightened stress, now they're feeling depression, anxiety, worry, emotional fatigue, exhaustion.
I'll tell you what's going to happen. The same thing that's been happening. You see how all these plane crashes is happening?
I do.
How planes blowing up over the Potomac River. That's exactly what's happening. People are not going to work. All these DEI stuff, people not going to work. People not showing up. People are going to start taking time for themselves. I took a day off after the election. So did my mom. So did my black aunt. So did, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't even want to come out of my room. After the election, I barely even came out of my room for 3 days, and I didn't even know what was wrong with me. And you know what I mean? And I just felt, it just felt so heavy. And even everyone else who I talked to all types of black women about this, because I'm on the radio, I'm a communication major, so I talk to people, you know what I mean? And everyone who I've talked to felt heavy, and not even just a black woman, you know what I mean? Everyone who voted in this election with a purpose and then saw that outcome be what it was felt heavy. You know what I mean?
They did.
Everyone who knew what was coming, who actually took the steps to be proactive and advocating for themselves, educating themselves, making sure other people knew what was going on, what was going to happen, felt heavy.
And I think sitting here as an African American woman, understanding that, as minorities, we are a part of the vulnerable population, but I begin to think about those who are trans, those who are bisexual, those who are homosexual, and the LGBTQ plus community. Quite honestly, those individuals are fearful. They're anxious. They're scared. Do you think that they want to go vote? But they know they have to because they have to get their voice out there. And it's just a simple fact that isn't okay. This is something that we have been working through, and I'm not even a part of the LGBTQ plus community, but the way I understand, I empathize.
Same.
Love who you love, be who you are, embrace it.
Yeah. All of that, because honestly, not even just like, you don't have to be Latinx to identify. You don't have to be LGBTQ plus to identify. You don't have to be, you don't have to be any of these things to identify if you know the policy. If you know what is actually, if you're able to read with understanding, if you're able to understand what's going on, no human is going to be able to be like, yeah, that's okay. Because even these conservatives, like, you know what I mean? God forbid your daughter needs a life-saving reproductive surgery. God forbid your daughter gets married and she gets pregnant in some way, somehow. She has an ectopic pregnancy, and now, because you voted how you voted, your daughter has to die because she can't get a life-saving procedure. These are the realities that we're going to be living. This is actually the realities that some people already are living.
Yeah, I'm about to say this is happening now.
You know what I mean? Like, this is actually already happening.
And it's real.
We got women going to court because they had a miscarriage, and they're over here trying to convict them for murder of a 13-week-old fetus. As if they're not already going through it mentally because they just lost their they just lost their child. Now you're trying to accuse them of murder. What's going on? You know what I mean? Like, and it's just like, it doesn't make sense, and it's just really disheartening. Like, I just keep on saying it, but it's just really disheartening, and it feels so heavy. It's such a heavy feeling. So I understand, like, not only the importance of your research, the importance of all the research done behind election distress and the election blues, but it's so important to talk about it, to not only research it, but to talk about it and to understand it, to be able to talk about it and have these conversations. Because I know we're on the same side of the fence, but even if we were on opposite sides of the fence,
being able to discuss
and have a healthy conversation and be able to communicate that being able to publish that have other people listen to it, resonate with it. That's what's important. That's how we get out of this. That's how we come out of it.
Yeah, it really is important. And I think as I was doing this research, something that you kind of know in the back of your head, but also, it's another thing just to apply it. I was thinking about these theories. And I feel like within the master's program, we're starting to get more accustomed with this and just learning, that everything has a role. Everything plays a part. And I think the biggest theories that, just overlapped was learned helplessness theory as well as social identity theory. But when it came to learned helplessness theory, this really explained how chronic political distress may lead people to disengage due to feelings of powerlessness. So this may look like, my vote doesn't matter. We can't change what happens anyway. And this is something that I predominantly hear within the minority community. And it's very sad because your vote does matter. And you matter more than you know. Mm-hmm. And I will always be the one. And I love telling my friends, especially when we're going through a low day, hey, you matter. You're loved. And even if you didn't feel loved, someone out here love you.
Seriously. That's real.
But more than anything, social identity theory, Tadgell and Turner, they suggest that group identification intensifies during elections as individuals seek emotional security through alignment. Now, when I began to do my research, I saw certain gaps. And like I mentioned earlier, I noticed that, there wasn't a lot of study on the individuals that ultimately had gone through election distress when this was happening. There was a lack of long-term study, as I mentioned, just kind of acknowledging the intersectional factors that went a part of this whole election, whether it was the policies, whether it was life circumstances that was happening individually, whether it was family circumstances. Like it didn't overview that. It didn't overview the different needs that diverse populations may have needed after the fact of this election. Quite honestly, there was lack of research on interventions to mitigate election distress, lack of global comparisons. That was something that I didn't see. I really feel that, and you can chime in on this one too as well, in other countries, they keep their politics under wraps. I'm not saying they have the perfect politics, but I am saying that, quite honestly, business that's happening in Canada, I don't hear here.
Yeah.
Business that is happening in China, I'm definitely not hearing it here.
Yeah, but I feel like a lot of times it's different forms of government. Like we live in a fake democracy.
Yes, we do.
And a lot of people don't have democracies around the nation. Like quite frankly, like democracies are kind of westernized thing. But a lot of people have like dictators. I feel like it can be. I feel like it's only as bad as it is now because we live in a fake democracy.
Yeah.
Where it's not actually a democracy. We're just calling it a democracy.
Because couldn't you consider this as a dictatorship? Or leading to it?
I feel like right now we're more in the oligarchy term, but when you go from oligarchy, the next level is dictatorship. So, but I don't think that Trump he doesn't have the brain power to be a dictator.
That's why I'm saying
dictators are geniuses.
Quite honestly, I feel like it's not even Trump that's running that house.
It's not.
But we'll leave that for another topic.
Yeah, no. Somebody's telling this man what to do. He always said that he would always run Republican because it's the stupidest party. He's that smart. But I feel like somebody even told him that. That was the speechwriter. He said that in a speech, in an interview.
And I believe it, quite honestly. But, just jumping into this research study, what we've all been waiting for, this was my method. So more than anything, my conceptual definitions of election distress, political engagement, and mental health. Election distress is described as significant stress and anxiety experienced by individuals during election periods, whereas political engagement is individuals who participate in political activities. And this may include, as we mentioned earlier, watching those social media websites and quiet voting, discussion of political issues, all these different realms. Whereas mental health, this is the state of emotional, social, and psychological well-being that influences how an individual copes through their stress.
Okay. Yeah. I definitely feel like political engagement it's hard to navigate when you don't know how to be politically engaged. I feel like a lot of people have never seen it from like their family members, and they don't know what it looks like. So they don't even know how to begin to know that they're feeling these things.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense.
It does make sense. And one thing about it is, and I honestly talked about this with Professor Watkins, I had a social worker that didn't want to participate in my study because she didn't engage in politics. And Watkins told me, she said, well, she should have did the Google survey anyway, because this is about, engaging in those politics. But if you're not engaging in them, put it down. That's fine. And, I think that was what this research was all about, just kind of viewing and just going through this entire process of, what is the state that people are in? Where's their mental at? Are you distressed? Are you stressed and you don't know it? Is the election playing factors that you need interventive services for? So more than anything, this method, as I did my research, this was a cross-sectional qualitative research design. It was a non-probability sampling. So I did this by ultimately just creating the Google survey, applying to the IRB research committee so that I can do the IRB application and get everything approved. And then I began to do my outreach with recruitment through social media platforms, as well as individually email participants, which ended up being social workers from my hospice internship. And they all had to be 18 years or older. However, on the Google survey, I was able to incorporate 3 different scales, which was really cool. And these scales, they made up of the mental health inventory scale, the political engagement scale, as well as the perceived stress scale. However, with the political engagement scale, this one was a little funky because they only have a few questions, which I feel that it didn't really engage, or how can you engage? More so with the survey if it's limited. So what I did was I went ahead and cherry picked some questions from a few political engagement scales to make that all right. And, I ultimately came to the research question, what is the relationship between mental health, political engagement, and election distress? What do you think the relationship is?
I don't know. I don't know. I know there is a connection,
Mm-hmm.
but I can't pinpoint exactly what it is. It's so much for me to even wrap my head around that I don't even know to even begin to say what the exact correlation is. Or I'm sorry, what the exact relationship is.
And it's a correlation too, quite honestly. But, my hypothesis in all was I hypothesize higher political engagement can intensify election distress, leading to a negative impact on mental health, tailoring a negative relationship. So ultimately a negative relationship, right? And so when I began to see my results after having 134 participants, which was amazing. I was very proud of this. Although, 3 participants, even though I said, hey, 18 and older, please, they still took my survey. So I did have to delete their answers because, they are a protected population and they need that consent from their legal guardian. But something I did notice within my first table, and what's super cool about this podcast is I'll be able to upload my data results. So you'll see my table 1 of the demographics. You'll see my table 2 of the reliability for the scales, as well as the table 3, which is the correlation. And that's a Pearson correlation, between mental health, political engagement, and election distress. But more so, table 1, this really just kind of gauged the survey to be taken by a higher number of females, those of whom were single, Caucasian, and whom were of average 31 years old with 1 kid. And I wasn't expecting that. I thought it was going to be, I knew that I was going to have a high number of Caucasians take this study, but I didn't know it was going to be a lot of women. What do you think?
Honestly, I feel like it would have been a lot more women.
You do?
I feel like men don't really tap into supporting research a lot. They might give their opinion, but if it's their opinion for research, it's not really, you know what I mean? So I just feel like that's not too alarming. I feel like the part that honestly, quite frankly, might shock me a little bit more, but it's not that much shocking now I'm thinking about it, is because I'm 22, you know what I mean? But you are older than me. Not saying you're that much older than me, but I guess that's the part that's more shocking to me. I guess it would have been, I thought it would have been a lower age.
Oh, of them being averaging at 31?
Yeah, I like the higher average, that. I think that's the only part that's throwing me
Because honestly, do you want to know the range?
What was the range?
The range was, if I'm not mistaken, obviously 18 to 69 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was awesome. I'm very grateful for that 69-year-old. I think that was pretty
Okay.
cool.
Shout out to Granddad for pulling up the Google form.
Or grandma.
Or
Who
grandma.
knows?
Yeah, we
It
don't know.
wasn't anonymous study research. So,
Yeah. Well,
you
shout
know.
out to the grands, to the boomer.
And, you know, with using the mental health inventory scale and the political engagement scale, as well as the perceived stress scale, you know, we went ahead and tested these reliabilities. And honestly, my mental health scale, my political engagement scale, as well as my perceived stress scale came back really good. And I was very proud because the mental health inventory scale, it was excellent, as well as the PES scale, which was good, and the perceived stress scale was also good. But more than anything, they're reliable, which is really good because I want to be giving a survey that matters. I want to give a survey that's actually going to gauge, you know, what's going on, what's the relationship, how can I help when I'm working in the field, how can I begin to advocate within the four walls that we're in right now, working with other clients. What do we do?
What do we do, Kayla?
Which moves us along to our table 3, which is the correlation table. So this is where Pearson's correlation between mental health, political engagement, and election distress. And after converting my Google survey results to the SPSS, which is a data survey analysis site, when utilizing Pearson correlation, my results from my study identified mental health to have a negative relationship. And this kind of just proved my hypothesis with political engagement as it increases. The results also serve to identify that election distress increases the more individuals engage with politics, which ultimately further worsens the individual's overall mental health. Everything that we talked about.
Yeah, I see it. I see it. But how can you not be engaged? And I understand, like, detaching.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I just feel like it's your civic responsibility, your civic duty to be at least aware.
Yes, it is.
Maybe not engaged, but aware.
And I think my biggest takeaways was, honestly, the lack of diverse input with highest engaging of the minority group class was made of African Americans at 26%, whereas for Caucasians, engagement was at 57%. And being in an area where, honestly, it's very diverse. Like I said, and I know that maybe it wasn't a shocker to you, this was shocking to me because I wanted more African Americans to be a part of this. I wanted more minorities to be a part of this. Like, this is something very cool that an African American woman was presenting. And I think, and I really do value all the people that was on my social media supporting me and just like my friends too, you know, through this process because their voice does matter. And it's important to know what they think.
Yeah. I can tell you. Well, I don't know. I know y'all can't see my face, but I can tell you exactly why that wasn't, why that didn't happen. Like, the same way why Kamala didn't get elected.
Mm.
You thought black men was going to show up for your survey. They didn't show up for their wives and their babies.
And it's
sad. That's
it's
just
a
truth.
sad reality, quite honestly. However, you know, more than anything, the more political engagement there is leads to a decline within mental health. And that is something to really sit with because what is happening in politics that would make someone, like you said, sit in their bed for 3 days, a college student.
Yeah.
A college student. And when I think about what this study really meant to me, I'm very blessed to have Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance. And I'm not of 26 years of age. However, I do know that point is coming. Now I am 23 years old. I'm about to be 24. I'm getting my master's. You get what I'm saying? This comes with new heights. However, I know that at a certain point in time, I won't be able to be on my parents' insurance anymore. And this is something that I watch openly. So many other students go through of, I don't have insurance. I can't just go to the doctor. I can't go get a checkup right now. I've seen another social work student suffer for more than a month because that person couldn't go to the doctor just to get a checkup. And that hurts because it's like, oh, I can't just give you my insurance just to go.
Yeah. And I think about people, even like on the mental health aspect, since we're talking about that, I think about people who want to take their lives, who sit in their beds crying all night, sit up all night, and can't even do anything can't even go get help because they don't want a $900 bill at the end of the day.
And you're absolutely right. And it's like thinking about those bills, thinking about, what people may even think about me if I ask for help. More than anything, minority groups face intersectional barriers. So that lead up to lack in likelihood for them to engage in politics, quite honestly, when we really sit back and we think about it, it's the reality. Am I going to want to go engage in politics if I don't understand it, or I'm going to feel less than?
Right.
Or if I can't get there?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing to help these people? What are we doing to help all the social classes? Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, they don't want people to vote. Like, I'm not going to say they don't want you to vote, but like there's not going to be any way that they're going to make it easier for us to vote when we had literal grandfather clauses that when we first started voting, the only way you could vote is if your grandfather could read when their grandparents were slaves who were not legally allowed to read.
Right.
So it's like, they're not going to make it easy for us. You know what I
No,
mean?
they're
It's
not.
not going to be. So you have to want to take the initiative to be like, okay, well, this is what this is. And you got to get your drive from somewhere. But you guys, it starts with initiative. You want
Yes, it is.
You want to know. You have to want to know. Maybe not be engaged, but you want to be at least aware of what's going on in your society and around you.
And I love that you say that, because it's not just the population that needs to be aware. It's everyone involved. It's healthcare workers, it's social workers, it's doctors, it's nurses, it's everyone, teachers. The list can really go on. And I really feel that this research study made contributions to social work. It really shedded light on the needed advocacy for all the individuals, especially marginalized groups of people. It promoted the discussion of inquiring more research towards, individuals' mental health, especially during electoral periods. But more than anything, we really need to promote outreach to consider distress crisis services for support within these communities. As far as my research recommendations, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face, there is a lack of research. We need research. But then, more than anything, will we be able to have research because there's funding that's getting cut? So which leads us into our next segment of what is going on in politics. And quite honestly, we need to promote this inclusivity and diversity. DEI is under attack with Trump, something that we also mentioned. We need to advocate on a macro level. The voice of the people, within these findings, we need to say something. We don't need to just be bystanders. We don't need to just talk about it. We need to do something about it. And more than anything, it should be remembered that this was a study from 2016 overview, from 2020, now to 2025. And people were stressed then. So you can only imagine how they feel now.
Yeah. It seems like everything's been taken to the extreme with this election, and I feel like this research, these stress levels are not any different. I feel like there's, we didn't see days of mourning, literally after, or we didn't see days of mourning after Biden. We didn't see days of mourning even after Trump's first election. We saw days of celebration after Barack Obama.
Yes,
so
we
it's
did.
like, it's just progressively getting worse and worse. And it's disheartening for people my age and our age, because this is what we've grown up with. We can only remember so far back as to, and maybe you remember before Obama, but I don't. You know what I mean? So it's like for me to like come into like a high, such a like a political high, like,
yes.
I have a black president, like I'm black and I'm proud. You know what I mean? My president is black, my Lambo is blue, all that good stuff. To Trump, to okay. And then, you know what I mean? And then it just keeps on snowballing. Now I'm 22, and this last election, I feel like I've lived through 4 at this point. This is my first major one, and I had to sit in my bed for 3 days.
Yes, I do know, unfortunately. And I think that, as we wrap this up, if I can leave anyone with this, I say this: stay strong, stay vocal, advocate for what is right. Let people know what a policy is and what it does, because that same policy has the power to help the next person. And sometimes, more often than not, that person needs help. Look after your loved ones. Look after your friends. Politics is a stressful time, but people are going through everything in one day. Quite honestly, they're taking it 2 minutes at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 millisecond at a time, because we're in that state. We're in that political state. We're in that mental state. And as we've seen over the research of this study, there is a negative relationship between mental health, political engagement, and electoral distress. And I just want to thank you all out for listening to me on this research podcast, as well as having Trinity here accompanying me. I hope you guys really enjoyed this and kind of just allowed it to flow and just listen in on us, because, we do have a lot to say and we want to get it all out to you, but we want to bring this in a way that it can be understood and it can be really processed, because we get it. We understand that, there's shortcomings, but also there is the part where we have to take initiative to do more. And we can sit in those shortcomings, but we can't. And we're just, we got to stand up. So I thank you.
Facts. Thank you for having me on here, Kayla. I appreciate it. Great podcast.
Thank you.
You can even